Today, on Energy Contact, water is free and abundant, but when somebody pipes it to your house for you, you've got to pay them. And if the pipe should burst or clog, you've got to stop everything and fix them as soon as possible. So in some ways, the pipes are more precious than the water itself. Energy is the same way, and we're looking at the pipes that bring it from the energy source to and through your body. So keep yourself open, because that's what's coming up right now on Energy Contact.
I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping and doubt. Keep my mind on better things. He ain't gonna worry and I ain't gonna complain. I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping and doubt. Keep my mind on better things. Just keep my mind on.
Hello, and welcome to Energy Contact. My name is Joseph Willenbrink. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you to the production staff here in the studio for helping me get my message out to you. Energy Contact is a series I'm presenting as a public service. It's about attaining perfect health, growth, self-improvement, happiness, and realizing your full potential. It's designed to present you a new way of seeing yourself and a new way of seeing the world around you. We're talking about things that have to do with making an energetic contact between yourself and your environment. There's no difference between the body, the mind, the spirit, the emotion, the intellect, the ego. There's no difference between mass and energy. They're all the same thing. There's something about us that loves to categorize, separate, classify, put these things in their own little separate boxes. But all that health and self-improvement we're talking about actually take place when we do just the opposite. It takes place when we smush these things all together, when we make an energetic contact between the physical world and the unseen one. We're presenting on these programs a brand new paradigm that's thousands of years old. We're presenting extraordinary topics for ordinary people. And let's move right ahead with that. Let's bring a slide up on your screen. Everyone please understand that I am not a doctor. This is not a medical advice show. It's not a medical anything show. There's nothing medical about it. If you're looking for medical things, you're in the wrong place. Now, I might call myself an energy healer or a chakra healer. So might you if you come to me. So might a lot of people. But state, federal, and local governments absolutely do not, and it's important to know that. There's a lot of important information on your screen right now. We're going to leave that slide up there for a couple more seconds. Please look at it very thoroughly if you will. And when you've got it down, now would be a great time to locate a pencil and paper. Now here's why you want to do that. At the end of the show, we're going to roll some credits, and on those credits there's going to be contact information for me. Now I invite and encourage you to contact me. I'm sort of hoping that something I have to tell you today might inspire you to want to do that, and I'll be glad to hear from you too. But in order to contact me, you're going to need that contact information. In order to get that, you're going to need a pencil and paper. There'll be plenty of time at the end of the show to jot that stuff down if your pencil and paper is ready. All right, everybody got that? Here we are back. Today is show number 54. And if you're tuning in for the first time today, well, thanks. Thanks and welcome. I think you'll enjoy the show. These shows are sequential. They build, and so there's some ramp-up things, some up-to-speed things, things we explained or introduced on previous shows that we'll be talking about today. But I'm also doing my very, very best to make each show have a lot of value on a standalone basis. And I think today's show does. I think you'll get a lot out of it. If what you see today piques your interest, and it is one of the first times you're joining me, well then I'll invite and encourage you to look for earlier shows. They'll be airing at later times, either right here on this channel or at different days and times in different neighborhoods. And if you look for them, I'll appreciate it. All right, and now it's time to get my buddy Slim on camera. This is my co-host Slim coming up here, and Slim is here for a reason. Since we're investigating what it is that energy contacts in the physical self, we have to know about a couple of things, don't we? We have to know something about energy, and this show is certainly a program about energy. But all that energy out there floating around in space somewhere does us no good whatsoever. It does us no good until we bring it into contact with something. My buddy Slim here is here to tell us what that thing is that the energy contacts. Remember, a body without energy is just a corpse. And energy without a body, well, it might be a number of cool things, but none of them are human. All right, previously on Energy Contact, we have been discussing flows. We've been looking at pipelines and channels in our bodies and what flows through them. When we were kids, we were always told that we were these individual hunks of mass, separate from one another to be sure, but even more than that, a body separate from a mind, separate from emotion, separate from spirit. We're seeing on Energy Contact a new way of looking at ourselves, and a far more accurate one at that. We're starting to see ourselves the way Einstein saw us, as pulses and frequencies and vibrations, as a set of forces, a bunch of internal ones acted upon by a bunch of external ones. Knowing that, whatever it is that makes you look the way you look, act the way you act, think the way you think, and feel the way you feel, must be a function of those unseen energy flows. That's why so many smart people can't figure it out. They're not looking there. In the light of this information, we have seen that it is very difficult, if not impossible, to be a spiritual person until and unless we promote the flow of invisible energy through your physical structure. That's pretty profound. All right, a while back, we spent a few shows comparing and contrasting so-called conventional and alternative medical practices, healing practices, healthcare practices, and such. And we saw that while there is a large disparity between them, an antagony even, that they started out as the exact same thing. Something happened to cause these things to split apart, to cause them to split apart into the appearance, and only the appearance, of different things, like light through a prism. And then just last show, we looked at some invisible pipelines, didn't we? We looked at DNA, we looked at acupuncture meridians, and we looked at something called nadis. We've seen that while all these forces are invisible, they manifest themselves in very visible, very tangible ways. They metabolize into the physical us. In fact, we've been looking since the very first shows at Energy Contact at the body intellect, how all those same things we always thought they were brain things that give us thought, reason, recall, memory, logic, intellect, ego, intelligence, all those things, they are in fact in every cell of our body. They permeate every cell of our body. We build everything into that body intellect, the promotions and resistances, the attractions and repulsions, everything. And then that body intellect turns right around and builds us. And we've spoken just a little bit about another invisible force on Energy Contact, a mysterious energy that those old Indian mystics called Kundalini. All right, so today we're continuing to look at those invisible yet very real channels or pipelines through which energy flows. We're going to revisit some of the meridians and the nadis and all that sort of stuff. So if you missed that last show, it's all right. You'll still get all of it. These are the same pipelines, by the way, that process all the other things that you can't see, but you know that they're there. Love, goodness, anger, fear, all of those things. Today, we're going to look not only at them, but we're also going to look at some background, some history and mythology even of them, because we want to understand where conventional science and alternative things, where they split apart, how standard medicine lost touch with these invisible yet very real and very crucially important pipelines. So that's what our show is about today then, huh? Some of the history and background of those invisible pipelines that conduct energy flows and create everything from form to spirit, and that are created by everything from form to spirit. We want to know how and why the knowledge of them has been squeezed out of our modern culture, even though our modern culture is based upon them. Soon, we're going to start looking in more detail at the energies themselves, at the things that flow through these pipelines, about the stops and the things that promote and the things that crimp off the flows through these pipelines. But first, we need to understand the pipelines themselves at the very basic level, at that energy mass interface where energy contacts the physical self. All right, so lots of things in store. But first, everybody, now we've reached the part of our show where you all get to take a big, deep breath. Close your eyes if you're in a place to do that, because we've arrived at the point where we get to take our virtual field trip. A journey in our mind's eye, like we do about this part of every show. For today's virtual field trip, picture yourself at a gathering, a party, Place, you know a few people, you don't know a few people. And as you walk in, somebody says, "Hey, how you doing?" And you reply, "I'm doing great. I'm happy as a clam." Then somebody else, somebody you don't know, says, "Excuse me, but do you know clams really aren't very happy? They don't really have synapses for emotion of any kind." And so you smile at them and you say, "Well, you know, I don't mean literally. It's just that I'm lighthearted." And the person replies, "Well, actually, you know, your heart always weighs the same. It doesn't really get lighter or heavier." Huh. Okay, so you just take that in stride and you're going on enjoying yourself at the party. Later on, you're having a conversation with another person. And this other person says something that you find profound. And you say to them, "Wow, that's a very high-minded concept." About this time, that same person who spoke to you earlier is nearby and butts in and says, "Hey, you know, concepts aren't high or low. They don't really float or sink." Okay. So later, the food comes out. And you look at the table and you say to somebody, "Oh man, I am so hungry, I could eat everything on that entire table." And guess who's standing close by? That same person. And he says, "Well, you know, actually that would be impossible because your stomach only holds about 2 quarts. All right, hold that thought. And we're going to go right to a slide. One of the recurring themes we see on Energy Contact is this statement: all models are wrong. Some models are useful. Every college math or science student learns this early on. They need to build models, not to accurately see what things look like, but to use as problem-solving tools. All right, let's come back up here. So, scientific models and mathematical models are not supposed to be photorealistic. They're not supposed to be photograph accurate. As long as the model works for us, we keep using it. Most of what we think are pictures of things are really not. They're not at all. They're analogies, visual metaphors, models. Depictions designed to help us get our brains around concepts that would be difficult for us to understand otherwise. Let's bring up another slide and we're going to look at something else. Here are a couple of other things that look exactly alike, but they're very different. On one side of your screen right now is the infinitesimally small atom. And on the other side is the enormous solar system. That atom there is much too small to see, and that solar system on the other side, much too large. By the way, those circles that you see on your screen, those concentric circles, they don't really exist at all. They're not there in the physical sense at all. So we know that what you see on your screen, these are not what the things they represent look like, but we accept them as that. So if they're not really real, why do people draw them? These pictures are from scientific sources, but they're trying to show invisible things by using visual analogies. All right, let's come back here. We're learning that the entire universe is a big system of similarities, things that are made in the image and likeness of other things, holograms. But remember, they're only models. Some things that look different are in fact the same, and some things that look the same, as we just saw, are in fact very, very different. 1 billion different people look at the same object and they see 1 billion different things. All right, let's go right to another slide. We're going to bring something else on your screen here. This is a picture of the human spine on one side of your screen. And on the other side is DNA. Both of these things look like pipes, don't they? There are a lot of similarities between these two structures. Now, we've known the shape of the spine since we've known we've had a spine. We've known about the structure of DNA, for less than half a century or so. Not very long at all in the scheme of things. Let's move right to our next slide, and we'll see the same thing with another view of DNA added on there. This one's a little bit more of a close-up. Now, DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, is pretty complex stuff. In short, it carries all of our hereditary information. Genes, as in genetics, they're made up of DNA segments. So DNA has to do with how your ancestors' energy, physical people who are long gone, builds your mass. It has to do a lot with the body intellect. Alrighty, let's come back up here. So, we're not too concerned with the details of DNA today. But we do want to understand that the way the DNA is structured is a scale model of other things, in the same way conceptually that atom and that solar system are scale models of each other. That twisty DNA shape, by the way, is called a double helix. Remember, not a picture, it's a model. We have a clue of the structure of DNA, but we really have no idea of what it actually looks like in the photographic sense. The spine, on the other hand, that we looked at, it's a little more tangible. And it's ostensibly, anyway, not a helix at all. But, like DNA, it's a column. It's a pipeline. And it's something through which information flows. Something through which energy flows. And inside it, there's a spinal cord with all that central nervous system bits and parts in it. More information and more energy. And inside that, there's other stuff. Cerebral spinal fluids and neuropeptides, ligands and receptors, stuff like that. And on it goes. Spines and DNA molecules are energy pipelines. Let's consider some other energy pipelines in your body. You have veins and arteries and capillaries. Collectively, we call them blood vessels. And what are they? Well, they're energy pipelines. And through them flow blood, which carries oxygen and nutrients, which are energy. You have pipes that are your digestive system, your esophagus and your intestines and things like that. And through them is food energy. And you have pipes that is your breathing system, your pulmonary system. And through them flows oxygen and air energy. All energy pipelines. Lots of things. Let's go right from there, and we're going to take a look at my buddy Cool Chi Guy. Cool Chi Guy's getting a little quality camera time today. Cool Chi Guy is an acupuncture model. He's a roadmap to acupuncturists. All those little points that you see on him labeled right now, those are all acupuncture points. If we wanted to, we could call them chakras. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. If you look close, you can see the lines that connect those dots, little blue lines there. Those things are called meridians. What's a meridian? Well, it's an energy channel, and through it flows chi. Now, we have hundreds of acupuncture points in our bodies, located along 14 meridians. But wait, the energy pipelines don't stop there. Keep Cool Chi Guy's meridians in mind as we go to our next slide of yet another energy pipeline. Here's our spine and DNA again, but this time there's something else on your screen. On the right of your screen is a representation of something called the Sushumna Nadi and the chakras. Now, if you missed the last episode of Energy Contact, this could be the first time you've heard of the Sushumna, but those old yogis knew all about what the Sushumna Nadi is. This picture is nearly identical to ones they would have drawn 6,000, maybe 10,000 years ago. Now remember, we're beating this point to death, but it's important. You can't really draw a picture of a nadi or a chakra because they're not physical things. Just like you can't draw a picture of the orbit lines that the planets travel on. Or like you can't draw a picture of the Earth's axis. Or like you can't draw a picture of air or love or integrity, all sorts of things. So what's on your screen now is a model, not a picture. Yet, it depicts something very real. More real, in fact, than most things that you can see and pick up. All right, let's come back here. So that Sushumna model there is a model of something mystical that you don't see every day. But we're about to look at something mystical that you do see every day. You see it so often, in fact, that we've forgotten it's mystical. Before we go there, let's take a second and explain nadis a little bit. The word nadi just means energy channel. You can think of a nadi as being like a blood vessel. Perhaps even more accurately, you can think of a nadi as being like Cool Chi Guy's meridians here. Except that, according to yogis, we have some 72,000 nadis. We got big ones, little ones, long ones, short ones. They're all over the place. Now you can think of the big nadis, like big blood vessels, and you can think of the little ones like all the tiny little capillaries in you, the smallest of your blood vessels. You got nadis inside nadis and nadis wrapped around nadis. They're just all over the place. 72,000 of them sounds like a lot, but it's important to keep in mind that you've got about 100,000 kilometers of blood vessels in your body. We don't really know, we can't get a count of how many blood vessels we have because they all run into each other. In sort of an energy contact, there's really no difference between one and the other. but we do know that there's enough of them to go around the Earth 2.5 times in your body alone. And most of them, like most of those little nadis, are just tiny little capillaries. All right, let's keep our focus though. What we want to look at today, what we're seeing, is energy pipelines and what flows through them. Remember, blood flows through your veins and arteries, and blood carries energy. Chi flows through your meridians, and chi is energy. And something called prana flows through your nadis, and prana is energy. All of these things, well, they're basically the same, just different words from different cultures, different people who weren't speaking to each other back at the time, who weren't in communication with each other, all doing their best to build models with which we could understand reality. All right, let's go back and take a look at that Sushumna Nadi again. Let's bring that slide back on your screen. There it is. The Sushumna Nadi, it's the biggest of the nadis, but it's still just a pole. The nadi itself is just that tiny little white pole in the middle of that figure there on your right. I guess it's on your right. The Sushumna Nadi is, well, just like blood vessels. Without blood, they're just empty hoses. Like plumbing pipes without water, they're useless. Well, that Sushumna Nadi, without some energy going through it, it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't really do anything. There's other things on that representation you see there. Those little circles, what are they? Well, those represent chakras. I mentioned to you that once we understand the pipelines, we'd look at the things on the pipes or in the pipes that either crimp or facilitate that flow of Kundalini energy. Well, the chakras are pretty much it. They're the things that could do either one, either resist the flow or promote it. And remember, pain and sickness are the resistance to flow. Health and pleasure are the promotion of it. In a moment, we'll see that the Sushumna has two other nadis that wrap around it, and we'll see why we should care about that. But before we get back to those pipelines and shows, there's another mystical symbol I promised to show you. So let's go to that right now. We've added something to our models of vertical pipelines. That very thing on the right of your screen there is the medical symbol. The medical symbol you call everywhere. Maybe you don't know the name of it. That's called the caduceus. And this picture here is a very artistic representation of it. I like it because I like those snakes there. In a moment, we're going to see a more accurate model. Now, the yogis knew that energy shimmies upwards in us in a snake-like and undulating sort of a fashion. Those snakes cross that staff on that picture there at 7 places. And those snakes are moving upwards. All right, let's come back up here. The caduceus is a symbol of the healing arts really more than it is the healing sciences, because when the first guys drew it, healing was more of an art than it is a science. But it's still there, and now, depending on your point of view, it is either the symbol of caring and nurturing and healing, dedicated, loving healthcare professionals, or if you come from another point of view, maybe it's a symbol of the man, of oppression, of big pharma, and stuffing pills down your throat, so on and so forth. But either way, have you ever wondered why this is the medical symbol? Well, we're going to delve into that right now, because the history of the caduceus is quite interesting, and it's germane. You might be surprised to discover where it leads. Most of you who have heard the story of the caduceus at all haven't heard the full story. We were told in health class that the caduceus originates with Greek mythology. Myth has it that it's the magic wand of Hermes. Hermes is the messenger of the gods, the messenger god. You might know him better by his Roman name, Mercury. We've named a planet and a element after him. Now this fellow Mercury, or Hermes, or whatever, had a staff, and like his feet, his staff had wings. As the story goes, one day Hermes was walking along and he saw 2 snakes fighting. And he threw that staff at them. And those snakes wrapped around it and they started climbing upwards along that staff. And in doing so, they stopped fighting. And their wounds that they inflicted upon each other healed. And they were at peace. And that's the picture of the caduceus. There's another story of another fellow in Greece, a demigod named Asclepios. He was the prototype demigod of medicine and of healing and even surgery. And he is often pictured with a staff, with a snake wrapped around it. All right, so the legend goes. And those are true legends. Kind of an oxymoron, but you know what I mean. But it's not really the origin of the caduceus. The Greeks got the caduceus from Egypt. Now the Egyptians tell a story of a healer named Thoth, or Tahuti. These are allegedly two different historical people. Now these guys are mortals like you and I, not gods. Their identities and stories have sort of merged over time, so we'll tell them as one. Anyway, Thoth, Tahuti, whatever. They were reputed to have snake-like staffs. Why? Well, because back in those days, when medicine and mysticism were about the same thing, and they were both pretty much primitive things, well, a lot of people back in those times had parasitic worms. And the only cure they knew to do, what they would do for that poor soul, is they'd cut a little hole in the patient and put a rod in the patient, and just maybe, just sometimes, those parasitic worms would climb up the rod and out of the person. Yuck. But that's where the staff came from. But even it is not really the origin of the caduceus. So, what is the origin? Well, before Greece and Egypt, there was India. And those very wise Indian yogis, rishis they were called, had a story of a staff that had 7 crossing points. The staff was similar to a spine, and through it there was an invisible, but a very real something they called the Sushumna Nadi. Energy shimmied up this staff in a snake-like motion, crossing at 7 points. And when it got to the top, it was no longer earthbound. And so, in an analogy sort of way, it had wings. All right, so now you're starting to see the picture. Now we're talking, I think. It's coming together for you. Let's bring up another slide. Here's another representation of the caduceus on one side and the Sushumna Nadi on the other. Now those 7 crossing points are nodes in the journey of energy as it falls up. You can see those snakes on the caduceus, obviously. But can you see where they are on that Sushumna Nadi? Look at those little red and blue circular pipelines on the side. Well, those things represent what became the snakes. And those are nadis too. They're called the Ida and the Pingala. We're going to talk a lot more about them soon. But for now, we want to know that the 2 fields represented on the 2 sides of your screen were actually one field. And despite what people think, they still are. All right, let's come back up here. Remember that those ancients were interested in the energy that comes up the spine. And they called that energy Kundalini energy. Now, not literally, but in effect, the word Kundalini means snake, and it's moving up that Sushumna Nadi. And that is where we're going to go in our next few episodes of Energy Contact. But for now, we're out of time. Until next time, I wish you peace and positive energy and a healthy life in Energy Contact.
I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping, and I'll keep my mind